She'd waited all her life to go to Paris. As for the reasons why, the dream of speaking French in France, of standing beneath the Eiffel Tower at the stroke of midnight, of lingering in sidewalk cafes took so long to come about, she chose to evade, not explain them. Her greatest fear, the one she carried like a locket close to her heart, was that in taking too close a look at the days that composed her 56 years, the dam that confined her existence might break and release a river of regret for all the places she'd never visited, the books she'd never read, the things she'd never done. With the given name of Nicole Marie Roxanne, she believed the choice was not her own. Bow legs, a widow's peak, and French, her inescapable and defining particulars. People asked if she was from Louisiana. Teachers inquired how she, a Negro girl, they said, could have not one, but 3 French names. Her neighbor to the left of their stucco bungalow, who never let anyone forget her Louisiana roots, Mrs. Albert, no, Albert, no hearty, chérie, spoke Creole French whenever she wanted Nicole to walk her miniature poodle, or informed gentlemen callers that she was otherwise occupied. Merci. Her father, clicking through false pearly whites, used his military French to teach his daughter basic phrases when he wasn't absorbed in one of his beloved books. Comment allez-vous, Mademoiselle Handy? A greeting so formal for such a little girl. Comprenez-vous, Nicole? Nicole, never Nicky, not from her father. Oui, oui. So that's Nicole. And here we have Mississippi in the spring of 1944. She was one of those women born under the sign of dissatisfaction. Nothing mother, father, or friend did brought her happiness. When Ruby reached 13, she complained of a burning deep within. She came to call it longing. Her mother called it restlessness. Now and then, Ruby May swore it kept her fingers from pushing buttons through hand-stitched holes on starched white blouses, somber skirts, and dresses full-on high to her neck that her mother, Martha, made her wear. The impulse pushed nigh on to a living creature. On hot nights she squeezed it, rocked herself quiet with its ache. It pushed her not to come when she was summoned and to run wild in the streets where the neighbors whispered behind their hands. The longing kept her in front of the mirror where she stared at her face, tugged at her skin, ran fingers through her hair, and pondered how it must be to stand at the head of the line, to be addressed by voices with respect, not lust, to be white, lady, not gal. Later, after the first blood stained her panties, she pondered the feeling of a man's lips on her own. Her thinking stretched to a world without a staid big sister, a demanding church with lengthy sermons and commandments that kept her from breathing. Had her mother known these feelings were the kind best done away with the stick behind the kitchen drawer or the back of her hand. Instead, Ruby May was labeled a lazy child, a dreamer. So now Nicole is in Paris. She finally gets there after only 38 pages in the novel. And she's arrived, she's jet-lagged, but it's her very first time in Paris, so she wants to get out and see the city. And she stops near the Fountain of Saint-Michel, which is near Notre Dame. And she's sitting in that area, smacking on a sandwich. A heavy hand tapped her shoulder. Her mother's warning of mayhem transferred from California to France. Turning to face the source, she secured her hold on her purse and vowed not to be the victim of a crime. Minutes ago, this very man had waved to her, and now he stood beside her table. Wrinkle-free skin, clean-shaven, 40-ish, Nicole guessed. His shirt was buttoned up to the collar where a tie should have been, inches of cuffs exposed below his jacket sleeves, white socks below the hem of his pants. You are American, oui? He rushed his request with coldness supposed to maintain her attention. But amidst the French conversations within her hearing range, this man's heavily accented English was a surprise. She frowned at the man, then at his hand on her shoulder, and figured if her glare didn't confirm her country of origin, then she didn't know how to cut her eyes as well as she practiced. Forgive me, I do not want to be rude. It is easy to identify American women. French women do not. They do not walk so fast and stiffly. You are American. His dimples had a magic all their own, and Nicole wasn't able to tell if he was conscious of how they worked their indentations in his cheeks, a subtle invitation. Allow me to present myself. I am Ousmane Diallo. Well, the sandwich, and he said, I want to talk to you. The sandwich crept back up her throat with a sour repetition, because I want to talk to you was a sorry line she'd fallen for 30-some-odd years ago, thinking she was special when a good-looking guy came on to her at a frat mixer. Many Americans, they do this talking, he said. Nicole shook her head. I'm afraid that's not possible. The cheerfulness dropped from Ousmane Diallo's face, making him seem boyishly sad. Not broken, rebuffed. You are certain? Erect and silent, Ousmane's posture pleaded for Nicole's agreement. His arms hung from his shoulders as if they too were perplexed and unsure what should happen next. But he bowed and headed for the bridge. So she's not much of a risk taker, is she? But you will see. Now we go back to Ruby. And Ruby has escaped. So she's like 16. And so to escape from your house in the middle of the night today is like no big deal. But in 1944 in Mississippi it was. And she's escaped from her house with her mother's boarder, Lurleen, who is in her 20s. And they decided to go to a juke joint. So in the backwoods of Mississippi, this is where everybody got together on a Saturday or Friday night. They had their best clothing on. They listened to music, and they had a great time. Not a place for a 16-year-old. But this is Ruby's vision. When Ruby entered the room, a musician occupied the farthest corner, standing with his saxophone in his hands, fingering the keypad in the way that he would for all his breaks that night, absent-mindedly. Moving through the room, she felt his intention, unsure until Lurleen schooled her that his was the instrument that had taken her breath away. She sighed, and Chester, who's the man she's gotten a ride with, who had attached himself to his right side, mistook that sigh for timidity. He grabbed her arm, swung her so that her dress flared, exposing her short legs. Chester held her. His arms begged her to feel the rhythm of the music and the desire rising in his pants. Ruby felt the want. She saw it in the men that glanced at her, and she jerked away. She felt it from the saxophone man. Her body responded before she could think or will it to do differently. She stepped slowly, aware of that clinging dress, its fabric soft against her thighs. Years later, she would remember telling herself that this night was not for dancing, but for watching and sensations she had yet to understand. Instead, she conserved her energy, this power she discovered her body had, and popped her fingers, ignoring the sheen of sweat collected at the pit of her throat. The saxophone man sauntered from his corner to the band, which seemed to separate him. For him, even the piano player seemed to scoot the upright piano and his stool away from the center. Moses, she would call him when they met, because the crowd parted so wide for the man. But merely once that night, because he made it a point to let her know later, with the most serious of faces, he had no interest in Moses or the Bible. Arnett, he would say, is my name. Arnett, no middle name, Dupree. Arnett put the saxophone to his lips and blew, the notes soothing and sad. They sweet-talked Ruby, and she let the call of the saxophone work up her arms and down her spine. She squared her hips in a way she knew was nasty, because Lurleen had showed her when they had practiced what Lurleen had termed seducting. That was how Arnett worked her. He removed the felt hat from his head and covered the saxophone's bell, turning the music from blaring to muffled. He blew one long note that reached for her soul, and she let it fly. They met in the middle of the room, and had Ruby been a woman by age and experience, she would have waited for him to come to her. Instead, she moseyed to where he had situated himself amidst a cluster of women, their finger waves shiny under the bare light bulb. To a woman, the five of them jockeyed for Arnett's attention, twisting this way and that, and showing off painted lips and supple curves and touches of whatever else was available to a good-looking saxophone-playing Louisiana man. Ruby stood among the women, chickens posing for the rooster, and grinned. Her lips, ample and tempting, were her best feature, and she parted them enough to reveal slightly crooked teeth. Ripe. Arnett grabbed her hand with the assumption of having known her forever. Ripe enough to bite. Why haven't we met before? She should have known. She should have known by that line and mocked him and rushed to Chester's arms because, despite his puffery, that young man meant no harm. Unable to decide which one influenced her most, the liquor, the moon, or the burning that demanded his comfort, she held on to Arnett's hand. Right here, Moses. Her eagerness drew the smirks of the women beside her. I mean, Sheridan. I've been in Sheridan. That's where I'm from. She was tickled by his laughter, but confused by the women's titters. Yet they fell away, moths parting a light gone cold. With that simple and slick line, they too might have fallen for just the taste of Arnett. They understood that with Ruby's naive reply, Arnett had chosen. Thank you.